Well, hello and good evening, and welcome to episode 4 of Humanity versus Insanity, the Crane Report. Now, you may not actually recognize me this evening because I am incognito, because I'm not wearing my usual grey jacket. The reason being is that my grey jackets are in the north of England. They're at Barton Moss, awaiting my return there. But more of that a little later this evening, when hopefully you'll join us for Fracking Nightmare at 9 o'clock. Meanwhile, on episode 4 of the Crane Report, we're going to move on from our last 3 episodes where we were looking at the reframing of British police. And over the coming weeks, we're going to be delving into subjects that you're not likely to see in the mainstream media, or certainly not discussed in the way that we're going to discuss them. And tonight, we're actually going to look at weather wars and look at what perhaps might just be occurring in the UK and elsewhere in the world right now. But before we do that, and before I introduce my guest this evening, I just want to confirm to all the readers and subscribers of Uncensored magazine that they have arrived in the UK some 6 weeks late. Here we go. Here is the absolute tangible evidence that the pallet arrived late on Friday afternoon, and we have a team of people packaging them ready to be distributed tomorrow and Wednesday morning. And with numbers 33 and 34 of Uncensored magazine. And to get your, if you want to subscribe, you can find the website at uncensoredmag.co.uk. And the sister publication, the New Zealand Journal of Natural Medicine, editions 10 and 11 were also on the pallet. So subscribers to these magazines, you're going to have a reading fest, because these will also be in the post later this week. And if you want to subscribe to these truly outstanding magazines, these are the magazines that Big Pharma certainly does not want you to read. You can subscribe to these on the website, which is nznaturalmed.co.uk. Right, more of those magazines perhaps a little bit later. So tonight, weather wars. It can't have escaped anyone's attention that the UK has been experiencing some rather unusual weather, and not least in the southwest of the country, where much of the Somerset levels are basically underwater. And it's not limited to the southwest. This is the southeast. This is the Mole Valley around the Leatherhead area. But the Somerset levels, this is one such property there where the owner has forked out some £5,000 to build a barrier around his property, making the observation that if he waited on central government or even the local authority to do anything, he'd be coming back to a property that was devastated by water. Now, the UK isn't the only country to be experiencing extreme weather. In the northeast of the United States of America and the Midwest, they've been experiencing extreme cold, with temperatures going down to about minus 40 degrees. Now, I have been in those kind of temperatures when I was in the oil industry up on the North Slope of Alaska, and let me tell you, it's cold. It's extremely cold. The difference being, of course, that in Alaska, people have the clothing for it because they expect those kind of temperatures. In the Midwest and the Northeast of the United States, I doubt whether too many people had the right clothing. In California right now, California is experiencing extreme drought, along, of course, with the Deep South and the Midwest of the Deep South there, around West Texas, where landowners and farmers have been running out of water, and in fact taking the gas companies to court for extracting water from their aquifers and leaving them inadequate supplies even for domestic use, let alone for providing them with their agricultural livelihood. And now we see the same situation in California, where once again the gas companies have been given priority over the private citizen. Of course, we've seen Other areas of the world, like the Philippines, with dealing with horrendous flooding. So something is going on. There's no doubt that the weather is very, very unusual. It is extreme weather. And of course, there are a lot of people who are being perhaps a little bit overly simplistic by simply suggesting that this is directly related to climate change, to anthropogenic climate change. But perhaps there's something else going on here. Because if we look at what is occurring in the Somerset levels in particular, then a sequence of events over the last decade or so goes way beyond the cock-up theory. It would appear that there has been a deliberate strategy to flood the Somerset levels and perhaps even other parts of the country. Now, shock, horror and absolute disbelief, this did actually make it into the mainstream media, and it seems that Christopher Booker has been doing some research for himself and looking at the situation. And in his article, which appeared in the Daily Telegraph, actually, in the UK on Saturday, he says, devastating evidence has now come to light. Not just that the floods covering 65 square miles of the Somerset levels could have been prevented, but that they were deliberately engineered by Labour ministers in 2009. Regardless of the property and human rights of the thousands of people whose homes and livelihoods would be affected. Furthermore, that wildly misleading Met Office forecast in November led the Environment Agency to take a step that has made the flooding infinitely more disastrous than it need have been. It continues, the smoking guns begin with the policy decision announced in 2005 by Labour's Flood Minister Elliot Morley, later to be jailed for fraudulently claiming more than $30,000 on his MP's expenses. Under the heading, Saving Wetland Habitats, More Money for Key Sites, Morley directed that to comply with the EU's Habitats Directive and part EU-funded study involving the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, the World Wildlife Foundation and the Environment Agency, flooding in Somerset should be artificially promoted because wildlife will benefit from increased water levels. The 13 local drainage boards responsible for keeping the levels properly managed were all to be co-opted into implementing this policy. Well, it's very interesting to note that a mainstream journalist is actually starting to scratch beneath the surface and draw their own conclusions. And many of those viewing tonight will be familiar with a document that first reared its ugly head 22 years ago, yes, 22 years ago in 1992, a document known as Agenda 21. The good news is that despite the fact that the document's been pretty much kept under wraps from the vast majority of people for that 22 years, more and more people are now starting to take an interest. And I'm sure we'll be exploring more of that as we go through the evening. Now, I wanted to introduce you to my guest this evening, because my guest is a very interesting gentleman. And I first met with David Lim, I think it was about a year or so ago, where he was giving a presentation on his research into weather manipulation through geoengineering. So who better to join me on the discussion tonight, where we look at weather wars, than David Lim. So David, welcome to Humanity versus Insanity.
Good evening, Ian. How are you?
I'm very well, David. And you're looking very dapper there, my friend.
Well, I thought I'd dress for the occasion. I see you didn't know.
Well, absolutely, yes. I've dressed down this evening, but there you go. I'm slumming it. I'll scrub up next week. Anyway, David, so your thoughts. In the introduction there, I was sort of giving a very brief introduction to the aspect of weather manipulation and the fact that what's occurred in the Somerset levels in particular goes way beyond the proverbial cock-up theory. It does look like it was indeed contrived, and it was just a matter of time before